Hey, what's up, everybody? So, you may be wondering why all of a sudden there's a video or posting, I should say, of a recorded conversation between myself and a chief of primary care at the VA. But let me enlighten you. So, this conversation is a further result of the bigger situation that I've been dealing with. And let me explain. So, back in 2019, roughly in August, I think it was towards the end of August. I think around like August 20th, August 19th, something like that, August 18th. Um, the someone at the police department there in Zanesville had reached out to the VA. First, I guess, according to the records, they reached out to the Zanesville VA clinic there, the CBOC. Couldn't get a hold of anybody there that would help them. So then somehow they got either transferred or they contacted the Columbus VA and got in contact with a Franklin Stump, which was one of the providers there in the mental health department of the VA, in which the public servants from the police department, these traitors, provided false reports to Franklin Stump in a way to defame my character and to make it seem to him like I was suffering from some kind of a mental breakdown or some kind of an issue like that. And so what they did was, I don't know exactly what they told him, but whatever they told him, he thought it was pertinent to provide a diagnosis for me based on their hearsay reports, which weren't even factual. I mean, granted, yeah, I may have been experiencing some paranoia and some anxiety from the shit that they were pulling and doing to me, all the threats on my life and threats on my property and the constant harassment and terrorism that they were doing to me. So, I mean, it may have been somewhat valid only from that standpoint, from what they did. So, essentially, they caused the problem, and then they got me in, caught up because they they weaponized what they did to me against me by contacting the VA and getting the VA involved. And so the VA actually conspired with the police department, and they worked together to create what's known as a pink slip or a involuntary writ. So that way they could come and abduct me from my house and further defame my character, make it seem like I was suffering from mental delusions. So that way they didn't have to do their job. Because, I mean, after all, it's not like, taking care of the noise would have been much easier and simpler. I mean, hell, they could have taken care of that in about a week or two, maybe a month. I mean, let's just say 6 months, okay? The city could have handled that. But no, over years, they decided to terrorize me. And then 2019, end of 2019, so about a year into it at that point, they they conspired with the VA. And so what ended up happening is they came to my house and threatened me and told me that if I didn't comply with them and I didn't get in their vehicle and let them take me wherever they didn't even tell me where they were taking me. For all I knew at the time, because under threats of duress and violence, and they had their guns out and were threatening to shoot me, they forced me into their car and wouldn't tell me where they were going to take me. Ended up taking me to the local hospital, which that place just gives me the creeps every time I see it. Genesis Hospital. Just something about that place in the pit of my gut tells me that it's a bad place. There are bad people there. So, anyways, as I digress. So they sent me there, or took me there rather, against my will, and forced me to be evaluated by these so-called doctors. Well, according to the so-called doctors, they cleared me of these false reports and false claims and this fraudulent diagnosis that was provided by the VA, and proved that they were conspiring together. And the VA provider, Franklin Stump, was taking fraudulent information and creating very real diagnoses in my record that was very damning and damaging to my reputation, to my character. Caused most of the VA representatives and providers to not give me the benefit of the doubt. But I think that's what the police department wanted. The officers that were involved in all this, potentially those incompetent quota hire dispatchers that hated to do their job. They didn't want to take the calls, the complaints. So they used their quota hire status and sensitivity to attack me because they're just that incompetent and stupid, I guess. So anyways, so back in 2019 when this happened, I was forced to go to Genesis Hospital there locally for about 24-hour period. Was cleared of their bullshit, but then they lied some more. I can't remember the lieutenant's name at the time that was there. I don't think he works for the police department anymore. Which I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. But anyways, they lied to the doctors at the hospital and told them that I had a propensity for what they call it, relapsing. Which it just amazes me that these asshats in uniform think that they can go around and give fraudulent information about people. And but I guess they can, because these providers and people in general think that these fucking traitors are heroes, and so they just listen to what they're saying and think that they're trustworthy. But in this case, obviously, as I've proven, these fucking asshats in uniform, the traitors with badges, lied. And what that had done, well, actually, before I get into that, so after I was at Genesis for 24 hours, they transferred me involuntarily by ambulance against my will to the Chillicothe VA, which they told me once I got there, I had to stay there for a week. So they weren't telling me what was going on. They weren't being honest and upfront with me. I was being dragged around like some kind of animal. And they wouldn't listen to anything I had to say, of course, because of the defamation from the police department, from the police officers, these traitorous cunts. And so for about a week, it took me to finally get through to the people at the VA there in Chillicothe that I was being forced to deal with. And thankfully, because I recorded some of the interactions and some of the evidence and posted it to my YouTube channel, they were able to access that information while I was there. And so it quickly, once they realized what was going on, they, as quickly as possible, got me out of there, because they realized that it was all fraud. But of course, I mean, they have no way to enforce any of that. So I think they reported some of it, but then also made some notes in my records. But essentially got me out of there as quickly as possible and got me back home. Now, what happened after that, since then, and at that time, I was actually associated with the Zanesville VA, CBOC. That's where my primary care was. And shortly after that, in 2019, August 2019, I started experiencing a lot of reluctance from providers and refusals of service. And I started finding it very difficult to get anything accomplished through the VA. And I suspect it was because of that situation that the traitors at the Zanesville Police Department perpetrated against me by lying to these providers and defaming my character. And so when I deal with providers that look into my medical records and they see these defaming, fraudulent diagnoses that are only there because the police officers and dispatchers, the city employees, the public servants lied to them. So they see this fraudulent diagnosis and they don't really look any deeper into it. They just see it on its surface. And of course, they hold that against me. And so it's defamed my character with my providers. It's defamed my character with the VA. It's made it nearly impossible to get the care that I actually need when it pertains to like chiropractic care, neurological care, stuff like that for injuries that I sustained during my service that are service-connected injuries. And in that conversation with Adam Jackson, the chief of primary care at the Chillicothe VA, I was attempting to address the situation as a whole from my experience with him, because of the fact that fast forward to that point, which was middle to end of last year, right around, I think, August or September of last year, was when I first got in contact with him and had the first conversation. I want to say it was the end of August, beginning of September. And after that, after we had our first conversation, he had dodged my calls and messages and so forth, wouldn't return my calls. So I started filing complaints against him through the VA hotline. And that's what I was referring to in the conversation about how he's the point of contact on the complaints that I file against him, because at the VA hotline, I was informed by the representatives at the VA hotline when checking up on the complaint cases that in particular, the case that I had against Adam Jackson, he was listed as the point of contact, and he was the one that was in charge of investigating the complaint. And so the VA hotline, of course they don't care. It's like everything else in the government's compartmentalized, where, the right hand doesn't really know what the left hand is doing. And when you try to, make sense of it all, it's just, you can't, because you got people that are isolated in their departments and they can't give you any information, or won't, or are not allowed to. And it makes it impossible to get anywhere. And so what's transpired is, because of all of this, that the fallout, if you will, from all of this. See, after a couple of years of trying to deal with the VA and not get the services that I need appropriately, and then, of course, dealing with the COVID nonsense for a couple of years there, that was also discussed in that conversation with Adam Jackson. See, at the time when I knew I couldn't trust the providers at the Zanesville VA, nor the providers at the Columbus VA, I decided to go to a different area, or associate myself with a different area, what do they call it? Region, I think. The VA facilities are set up in essentially regions or districts or something. I can't remember the terminology. But basically, like, for example, Columbus, Newark, Zanesville, and I'm not sure if Lancaster's included in that or not, but I think those facilities, those VA facilities, are part of a group. And then Chillicothe is part of a separate group that's not affiliated directly with those other facilities. It's in a different region, if you will. So at the time, because of the experience that I had with the providers at the Chillicothe VA when being forced to be out there against my will, I thought maybe I could trust them to do the right thing. And so I transferred the care out to Chillicothe and attempted to get established there. And that was right about the time, I think, that all this COVID nonsense started up. And of course, they were rejecting my appointments. I would call and schedule an appointment, and then they would cancel it and tell me that they're not seeing patients because of COVID-19, and making all these excuses for it. And then at one point, they tried to tell me that I would have to probably get a vaccination or a experimental injection to be able to be seen. And then they were telling me that for me to step foot on the VA property, I would have to wear a mask. And I mean, if any of you all have been paying attention, you probably know how ridiculous that is now. Maybe not at the time, because a lot of you were brainwashed and stupid, but now that most of the information is coming out, the truth about the coronavirus and the COVID-19, and the fact that it was engineered, whether there's a real virus or not, or it's electromagnetism, or whatever the situation may be, it's not a naturally occurring situation. But anyways, I don't want to get off on that topic. So because of that, I was refused care and service from that point on, for the most part. So I think the only health care I was able to get through the Chillicothe VA was dental work done, which, oddly enough, that went through without a hitch. And that was through community care, and I was seen in the community. No problems there. But all of a sudden, there's these issues with chiropractic care and neurological care. So fast forward, I was attempting to get a chiropractic consult so that way I could get a back adjustment because I've got a back injury and a couple back injuries, and I needed an adjustment to mitigate some of the pain and discomfort. And so at the time, I requested a chiropractic consult as well as a neurological consult because of the fact that I've been experiencing some side effects or some strange effects, if you will, from this implant that I have in my neck. And so I was trying to be proactive and request two separate consults for two separate issues, essentially or technically. And I tried to explain that to these, providers at the VA, the nurses and so forth, but they're so utterly stupid and incompetent, they don't really listen half the time. And then on top of that, I mean, you can hear Adam Jackson's response that, he didn't really say why the chiropractic care consult was rejected. He just said that, well, his experts said so. They determined that it wasn't necessary. Wasn't that nice? Isn't it nice that his experts can determine that I don't need chiropractic care, even though I do, for a back injury that was sustained during my military service that's rated by the VA? That's, recognized by the VA. It just amazes me that, these people can get away with this. Because now it's not just Zanesville, it's not just Muskingum County, it's not just Ohio. Now, evidence is showing that they also conspired with factions of the federal government, the VA. So isn't it amazing that the municipality, when they want to attack a man like myself, they can employ all the resources of the city, the county, the state, and even the federal government to destroy little old me, a man, a combat veteran, just trying to get peace and quiet in his home. But for some reason, they tried to tell me that they don't have the resources or the funding or whatever the excuse was to, address the noise issue, which, regardless of the funding or regardless of the excuses, it doesn't matter. The law requires it. So I added this phone call, or I unprivatized it, if that's the right terminology, to give you all a window into the bigger picture of what I'm dealing with. Because, see, this isn't just a few separate situations that aren't related. This is all interrelated. This is all, what's the word? This is like the outcome of what they have done over the years. And so, I mean, obviously from the evidence, the traitorous cunts at the Zanesville Police Department and the public servants of Zanesville, Donald Mason and his cohorts, his flunkies. Yeah, they're so incompetent and so stupid and so lazy. Well, not really lazy, because, I mean, look at all the efforts they went through to attack me and terrorize me. But they didn't think it was, pertinent or important to, go after the business owners and just make them be quiet at night. So isn't it amazing? The efforts that these people will go through, the resources that they'll utilize to not do the right thing. I mean, I'm sure they probably could have used half the resources, a fraction of the time. Could have saved a ton of money if they wanted to by just addressing the noise issues. But, I mean, what do they care, really? There's no accountability, right? Ohioans don't give a shit. And honestly, that's who I really blame for this. The fucking cunts on the jury that are too fucking stupid to pay attention to the treason that's being perpetrated right before their very eyes. Even though I say specifically to them that things like, or ask them, let me rephrase that. I asked them during the trial, before the cross-examination, I remember asking the jury if they were aware that public servants make mistakes and break the law and that sort of thing, to bring to their attention the fact that this was a mistake on the public servants' part. The ones that they took side of. The ones that they ignored their testimony when they admitted that they're traitors and cunts by ignoring their duties and obligations and committing negligence to allow them to charge me in the first place. But none of these people, Kelly Cottrell, Ronald Welch, Michael Hughes, Keith Edwards, what's her name? Sowers, the clerk. I can't remember her first name. All of these people, Melanie, oh damn, I can't remember her name either. The cunt in the probation department. See, all these people, really, truly, they deserve to be tried for the criminals that they are. They should be subject to a military tribunal. And if found guilty for their crimes of treason and sedition and other things that they've done to circumvent the Constitution, circumvent our God-given rights, the law, and their own duties and obligations, if found guilty in a tribunal, I would gladly serve on a firing squad or be the executioner for retribution and for satisfaction, because I think that's necessary, and for closure as well, to know that these people won't be allowed to do this to anybody else ever again. So if that opportunity ever presented itself, I would gladly, and with a smile on my face, do what needed to be done for the good of this country and for the good of the people. Because everything that these people are doing goes against our God-given rights, our quote-unquote freedoms. But it's most of you all that allow this to continue. I don't want to pay attention, that attack people like me for exposing the truth because you're too simple-minded and stupid to realize the truth. Or you're just brainwashed, which is probably part of it too. But ultimately, it comes from low IQ, low education. Because whether you're, extremely intelligent, a genius, or know everything in the world, it doesn't matter. As long as you have the ability to critically think for yourself, and not just take people's word for it, well, that makes it all the difference in the world. But these fucking idiots at the courthouse, they can't do that. The only thing they can do is apparently conspire together to deprive people of their rights. Use the system to their advantage, which is unconstitutional. Give themselves titles like Esquire and other things, which is unconstitutional. And then on top of that, not having any checks and balances. Every level of government is supposed to have checks and balances, and well, I guess here in this situation, the people from the state are supposed to be the checks and balances. But when you got people, from Ohio that the majority seem to be so inbred and just retarded that they can't see the forest for the trees, well, it allows this sort of thing to happen. And the politicians probably know that. That's probably why they set up the home rule status and allowed that sort of thing, because then they could do whatever they want. And the people will just accept it because they're that stupid. So if you're an Ohioan, especially one that's never traveled outside of this state. It's probably people like you that are to blame for this sort of thing, because all it takes for evil to succeed is for good men, good people to do nothing. So just think about that. Because of people like you, good men like myself get attacked, terrorized, aren't able to enjoy the fruits of my labor, so to speak. So I blame you cunts. And none of this will change unless you change.